just take some time and look at some warning signs, because people do, we said 80% of people do give some warning signs. They don't shout from the mountaintop that they are suicidal, but they give subtle hints, and we're going to look at some of those. Learning to recognise those signs and take them seriously can help reduce the risk of suicide. And Albert Camus is one of the great philosophers of our time. He says, suicide, like a great work of art, is prepared in the silence of the heart. Leave this workshop and go down to the checkout chick at Coles and tell her you've been at a suicide prevention workshop and see how much communication you get from the checkout chick. Probably not too much, because people don't like to talk about these issues. They don't. It's a sensitive issue. People don't know how to respond. Although having said that, I did this at one workshop that I did at Noosa or Tewantin many years ago, and the checkout chick did ask me that very question, and I told her what I'd been doing, and she had been impacted by suicide, so we were able to have a great conversation. But in the main, people don't want to talk about sensitive issues such as suicidality. People don't want to know about it. We're living in a very prosperous country. Everything's at our feet. Sadly, it's unless we've been impacted by suicide that we want to start looking at that. So warning signs are the attributes and behavioural attributes or clues that alert us that an individual may be contemplating suicide. They can be either verbal or non-verbal, and what we need to do, if we're hearing or we're seeing something like that, we need to check them out. Remember that 80% of people who have died by suicide have reached out for self-help in the months prior to their death. Tragically, 80%, a high proportion. Remember also that most people who complete suicide don't necessarily wish to die. They want to get rid of the pain, the stinking, what Schneidman calls as psychache. They want to get rid of that, and they want things to change in their life. Suicide attempts are often a means of communicating intense despair, pain, and suffering, and we need to understand that. Schneidman also says one curious paradox in suicide is that individuals do leave clues, and perhaps as part of their deepest ambivalence between the need to stop the pain and their concomitant wish for intervention and rescue. He also says that some people who take their lives are capable of dissembling and failing to give any overt hint of their lethal intention. So about 20% of the people that do take their lives have given no prior warning. But the high majority, and that's where they're people that you and I connect with every day. They give some warning signs. Again, the Men's Shed organisation is a great organisation for older men. So things to look for when we look in the area of warning signs: physical change, change in behaviours, change in conversation, and change in feelings. Any change to the individual that may be out of character to that individual. I'll talk a little bit more about these 4 characteristics there. But if we see sudden changes of behaviour, it's important to understand that. And it's the last thing that you suspect. But I think we have to be very mindful that 80% of people that end their lives do take their lives, give out some prior warnings, and that we need to look for if there are any changes. Now, those changes were noted. The guy was giving subtle hints. But the biggest change was that in this young man's life was that he was very involved in the debating team and the sporting team, in the whole range of academic activities within his school. He's very popular. He was the model student for his peers and whatever. And the biggest change in his life was that he withdrew from all of those activities up to about 3 months prior to his demise. And that seems to be a standard pattern that I've noted in my research, and I see Jared nodding his head. I know that he's noted that as well. But 3 months prior to his demise, at the end of the 3 months, he's got to a situation where he can't resolve the issues, whatever they were for him, and nobody found that out. He couldn't resolve or see another solution, that he ended up in taking his life to suicidality. So we need to look at if there's any changes, and we need to address them. We need to ask questions. We need to be intrusive if you're a good mate to somebody, if somebody sees something in my life and he's a good mate, I'd expect him to say, Claude, what's going on here? I see something's not right. What's going on? That's a good mate. And, we need to get to that point where you develop those rapports. In your men's sheds, you get to know people. In the people here from the Shack, which is a drop-in centre in Nambour there. Get to know your clientele, get to know people. Ask those questions. Don't be reticent to ask those questions. So physical change, let's look at some of those. Major changes to sleeping patterns, too much or too little. Is the person becoming depressed or despondent about some of the things that they're going through? What are the issues? What are some of the things that they're going through? Are they being, loss of energy, loss of interest in personal hygiene and appearance, letting themselves go, not taking care and pride in themselves. The person may have been very astute and dressed very well and combed their hair every day, and all of a sudden that behaviour starts to change. They're wearing very shaggy clothing, they're unkept, all those sort of things. Loss in interest in sex. Sudden extreme changes in eating habits, either loss of appetite or increased in appetite. Putting weight off or losing weight, increases in minor illnesses. And because of the circumstances, their immune system's not kicking in and working well. One of the greatest resources for somebody that's contemplating suicide that we can access is our local GP. And a lot of research indicates that a lot of people, tragically, that have ended their lives have seen their GP, but for unrelated issues to their suicide before their demise. So change in behaviour, alcohol or drug misuse, fighting or breaking the law, isolation and withdrawal from family and friends, quitting activities that were previously important, prior suicidal behaviour, non-harming, self-harming, withdrawing from friends and family, increased social isolation, desire to be left alone. Again, that isolating the individual, isolating themselves from people, from the family, from people that are close to them, whatever, is a key significant risk factor, and we need to be very alert to something like that. And we need to address it and say, hey, look, I noticed that you haven't been doing this, that, or the other in the last couple of weeks, and you used to love doing that. Is there any reason why you've stopped doing that? So you're not prying, you're asking concerning questions. And I've found in many circumstances in my youth work career that if I would ask the question, the young people would think, hey, this guy's in tune with where I'm at. I've had many young people say when I've asked the question about suicidality, no, I'm okay, but thanks for asking. And people do appreciate that if you have a close relationship, that you ask those questions. Changing behaviours, putting affairs into order, particularly older people. Giving away possessions, especially those that have a special significance for the person. I was doing a suicide prevention workshop many years ago, and I was talking, while I was doing that, a cleaner came to me and said, what are you doing, Claude? And I said, putting together a workshop, and he says, on suicide prevention. He said, oh, I've been impacted by that, so I put the material back and down, and I said, I'll call him John. I said, John, tell me about your experience. And he cited the story where he had a very close friend. He lived in outside of the rural community. A very close friend of his came to visit him one night, and they had a lovely meal, shared a good bottle of wine together, and come 10 o'clock, she gave him a kiss on the cheek and said, see you later, I'm going home. And he stood at the veranda and was ready to wave her off, and next minute he saw the boot lid of a car get flicked open, and okay. So he stood there and watched what was going on. She got out of a car and went around to the boot and picked up this big Asian artefact that she had in the boot of the car. And this had sat in her room, in the lounge room, and she talked to everybody about this prized possession that she had. She just about idolised this thing, and she picked this artefact up and she walked back up John's stairs and put it on his lounge room table and said, John, I want you to look after this for me for a while. John said, yeah, all right, yeah, no worries. And she drove off, and about 11:30, John started to stir in his spirit, and he started to think, why would she leave that? She hasn't lost a job, she's not moving house. There's something not right here. And he had the fortitude to get up and ring the police station, which was his closest police station, and he said, look, this is what's happened here. And he related the story, and the police were quite astute, and they said, where does this lady go when she wants to have some solitude or time on her own? And he pointed to a situation in the forest somewhere, and the police, fortunately, were able to go to that place, and the lady, sure enough, was there with her car and a hose hanging out of the back of the car from the exhaust pipe into the car, and in the process of taking her own life. And she was giving away something special to her, John was astute enough to pick that up. Something changed in her life, and it wasn't a regular change, and he addressed that and saved that woman's life. You know, that woman still walks down the street every now and then. This is going back quite a few years, and every time she sees John, she runs up to John and says to John, "Thanks for doing something about my issue." She says, "Then I was serious about what I was going to do, but," she says, "I really enjoy life today." And sometimes we need to make sure that we address those changes. Conversational signs, no future. Person saying, "Oh, what's the point? Things are never going to get any better." Challenge those statements. Don't just let them be said and take them as just benign statement that the person's having an off day or whatever. Say to the person, "What do you mean things are never going to get any better? What's happening for you at the moment that's made you think this way?" So challenge those. Guilt, "It's all my fault, I'm to blame." Escape, "I can't take this anymore." Person alone, "I'm on my own and no one cares." Helpless, cares about me. Helplessness, "Nothing I do makes a difference. It's beyond my control." And talking about suicide or death and planning for suicide. Changes in feelings, whole range of feelings there. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go through all of those, but one of the ones I'm going to pick up later is the issue of hopelessness. There's a high correlation between hopelessness and helplessness to suicidality. Warning signs in older adults: reading material about death by suicide, disruption of sleeping patterns, increased alcohol or prescription drug abuse, failure to take care of self or follow medical orders, not taking medication, stuff like that, stockpiling medications, sudden interest in firearms, social withdrawals or elaborate goodbyes. A lot of people have said to me, "Hey, you know, John's gone, but he was really friendly with me last week. He was, you know, what was he doing?" Saying, "Hey, I value you as a friend, but I'm going to exit this world," and we're giving some of those elaborate goodbyes. Rush to complete or revise a will.